That's that 1-5. Yeah.
Good morning.
Morning.
Thank you for being here and turning in via live stream.
Good.
Today's meeting is the first we've convened as a full board since the annual retreat last month. The retreat allowed us to explore the topic of student-centeredness as a representative group of students from across the system participated in a panel and joined us for a discussion over dinner. Their remarks were truly insightful. My takeaways is that the student experience is positive in many ways. Students generally feel supported and prepared for career paths, but they noted areas in which we need to improve as a system. Mental health and financial aid were top of mind, as was communicating more about the resources that already exist. Senior Vice Chancellor Nguyen will speak more about the retreat later in the agenda, but I want to thank the students who participated, our student regents who facilitated the panel, and the regents, presidents, directors, and staff who were all highly engaged and thoughtful. As I begin the meeting, I want to acknowledge the pain that many students and other members of the USM family are experiencing. A long and divisive conflict intensified over the last month in ways that can only be described as horrific. Understandably, many among us are pained and grieving, and many of us seek to understand what's happening. I recognize there are no words that I can or anyone can say that will not be subject to a level of criticism. I also know that no words will solve the pain. I simply want us to all remember who we are and who we stand for. As a system, we subscribe to the values of civility and diversity, equity and inclusion. Now more than ever, as we interact with each other daily, we must embrace these values and aspire to perfect how we live them. Secondly, I want to remind students, faculty, and staff that university counseling centers, student affairs offices, and human resources departments can guide you toward help should you need it. I also want to take a moment to recognize some well-deserved accolades of members of our USM community. On the Maryland Daily Records list of most admired CEOs, you will find USM Chancellor Jay Perman, Salisbury University President Carolyn Ringer-Laprie, and Regent Bob Wallace. I must also note that you may have noticed that Bob Wallace is not at this meeting, as he is seeking political office. He resigned from the board last month. He's running for mayor of Baltimore. Bowie State University President Amita Bro was honored by President Joe Biden with the Presidential Lifetime Achievement Award. This award recognizes her lifelong commitment to build stronger communities through volunteer service. Please join me in congratulating all of the award winners. Tomorrow is Veterans Day, and I want to acknowledge our USM veterans to whom we owe a great deal. I am proud that active duty military and veterans comprise almost 1/5 of the USM student body. We truly are a military-friendly system, and many of our institutions have been recognized with this status. There's one veteran that I'd like to thank and congratulate. Last legislative session, the Maryland General Assembly honored former Senator, now Regent Doug Peters, who's joining us telephonically, by renaming a state scholarship. Regent Peters was a captain in the U.S. Army Reserve and earned a Bronze Star Medal during Operation Desert Storm. The state scholarship program, now known as the Douglas J.J. Peters Veterans of Afghanistan and Iraq Conflict Scholarship Program provides financial assistance to military personnel who served in the Afghanistan and Iraq conflicts and to dependents. Regent Peters, thank you for your service. Turning to our agenda, first we will hear from Towson University President Mark Ginsburg, who officially began his tenure as Towson's 15th president on October 30th and is hosting his first board meeting. Following Dr. Ginsburg is a brief campus safety vignette. Safety has always been a priority for the board. To highlight its importance and to better understand the ways in which we organize safety, we've added this topic to each board agenda. And after that, we will hold the education forum and then hear from Chancellor Perman and then the advisory councils. President Ginsburg, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chair Gooden, and welcome everybody. Welcome to Chancellor Perman, and welcome to all the members of the Board of Regents. It's great to have you at Towson University this morning. I'm sorry it's a little rainy because the campus looks even more beautiful when the sun's shining. But I hope you have a chance to visit our campus, not just today, but visit our campus often. Let me also welcome another group of people who are here. Some of my new colleagues, members of our staff senate, are here this morning. I wanted to thank Heather, who's the chair of our staff senate, and some of our staff senators for joining and attending the meeting this morning too. Great to have you here. Chair Gooden, as you mentioned, it is the Veterans Day week, and I want to also acknowledge and thank all the veterans among us and all the veterans who are students, faculty, and staff at Towson University for your service and for keeping America safe and our freedoms protected. This week, we held a luncheon on our campus for faculty, staff, and students who were vets that was very well attended. It was a terrific event. We acknowledge their service and thank them for that. And on Sunday afternoon, we'll host for the Baltimore County region with members of the delegation and our county executive luncheon right here in these ballrooms for about 350 people, celebrating their service and thanking them for their service to the country. Although, as you said, I'm new to Towson University, I'm not new to Maryland. I've lived in our state for more than 40 years. And over the years, I've watched and witnessed, I've observed, and have helped to celebrate the growth and transformation of Towson University to become one of our state's great public universities. It's only my second week, but there's much to celebrate. And as we do celebrate, I thank my colleagues who joined the university long before I did for the work that they have done to help make these achievements possible. Although I have joined the university at a momentous time for higher education, where questions are being raised about everything from the value of a college education to its cost to issues of academic freedom and free expression. These indeed are complicated, complex, but also important times for higher education everywhere in our country and everywhere here in our state. So as I said, our university has achieved much in the recent past. And today, TU, as I mentioned, is one of our state's great public universities. We have our largest first-year class in the history of the university, and we've had more applications already for admission to the university for next fall than the university ever has received. These are really, really good signs of the trajectory, and I thank those who've come before me because they are the ones who created the opportunity for so many students to join us. In terms of the rankings, TU is ranked among the highest ranked public schools in the state by the Wall Street Journal. The university received a 5-star ranking recently by the Campus Pride Index, which scores universities in their efforts to create a safe, inclusive environment, in particular for LGBTQIA+ students, but really for all students. And in today's environment where we're speaking much about free expression, where we're speaking much about keeping campus community safe, we'll talk about that in just a little bit. This is such an important issue, and I'm so pleased that our campus has been recognized as a safe environment for all of our students. We've been recognized apropos with Veterans Day. U.S. News and World Report recently recognized TU as the fifth best ranked university in the entire nation for veterans. Number 5 in the country for veterans. That's a big deal. And it's particularly important as we celebrate the veterans in our midst this week. U.S. News and World Report also ranked TU as number 64 in the entire nation for social mobility. And Bloomberg Philanthropies recognized our university as part of the American Talent Initiative as a high flyer, one of only 28 universities in the country to be recognized as such, truly a national leader in providing access to opportunity and being an engine of intervention. And we've also been recognized recently by the Office of Fraternity and Sorority Life for TU's diversity and social justice work, being bestowed that work, the Diversity and Social Justice Initiative Award from the Association of Fraternity and Sorority Advisors. And so there's much to be proud of. And I'm particularly proud to come to the university at a time of great achievement. I'm particularly proud to come to a university that I hope, as I mentioned last night, a part of my work is going to be to try to make and work very hard to make a great university even greater. A university that's mission-led, but a university that's values-driven. A university that has all the necessary foundational elements for success in its future. The value that students come first. The value that everything we do is focused on the success of our students. The value that we thrive together, that this institution is committed to the success of each member of the community. There are great people at Towson. I've learned that quickly, and I've come to respect and admire those who serve this university and serve our state as members of our community. We have outstanding academic programs, and as you see, including the very room we're sitting in, we have terrific new and renovated facilities on this campus that have been so impressive to me as I've come to visit now and visit most of the buildings on our campus. We're going to celebrate next week an important event, and that's the successful conclusion of our RISE campaign, which is the development campaign that the university embarked on a few years ago, chaired by our own Nancy Grasmick and a distinguished alum of our university. Many of you know Fran Soistman. That development campaign exceeded its goal. I mentioned it last night, but I want to emphasize it again this morning. The goal had been $100 million, and more than $100 million was raised. We have a celebration in this room and the others in this hallway at the end of next week. And if you haven't heard, we celebrated last Sunday the success of our women's soccer program, which won the Coastal Athletic Association Conference Championship for the regular season, and then defeated in a very closely contested game Monmouth University last Sunday on the women's soccer field by a 2-1 score. They're playing tonight in Chapel Hill against the world-class North Carolina Tar Heel women's soccer team. North Carolina, by the way, the women's soccer team has won more national championships than any other women's soccer program in the country. And Carolina Blue will be there, but the Tiger talent will be on the field, and we're hoping for a great upset. I texted last night with Kathleen Vittori, our soccer coach, and she said, you know, Giants have been slain. Giants will be slain. And I told her, let's roar together and make that happen tonight. So that'll be a great thing. Let me say that TU is an engine of opportunity. And we provide access to excellence, we provide innovation, but most of all, we provide access to our students to succeed. And let me just give you a brief thumbnail of some of the things that I'll be working on over the coming months. First of all, my laser-like focus will be on success. The success of our students in particular, but also the success of our faculty and the success of our staff. In essence, the success of our entire community. You know, the whole is bigger than each of its parts. And we have to work as hard as we can every single day to be sure that our community is successful. And part of that is looking at and enhancing and trying to create the best possible experience for our students on this campus to help this university go from great to even greater. It's about having continuity in the very best of what's been and being open to change so that we can create the very best of what can be. It's about advancing something that's near and dear to the hearts of all the members of the TU community, and that's continuing to advance inclusive excellence on this campus. We're a minority-majority university that serves all, respects all, and that's open to all. And advancing inclusive excellence is part of, if not the essence of the DNA of TU. We'll advance the quality of public education in our state. I'm very excited about TU taking a lead role on the blueprint for Maryland's future and working closely with Regent Leggett, my old and dear friend Britt Kerwin, and others, and members of the state legislature and the State Department of Education to advance public education, to advance not just P12, but P16 education in the state. We'll enhance current and develop new academic programs. We'll work very hard to help the transformation of the MHEC process to allow us to do that in ways that are important for the workforce of the future in Maryland. And we will become an R2. a well-recognized research institution that's recognized by our peers around the country for the work that we do in research, scholarship, and creative works. We'll advance best practice. We'll create best practice, but our goal is not just to advance best practice. Our goal is to be sure that best practice becomes common practice. In my view, the best research universities not only advance research and theories and scholarship that allow for the creation of best practices, but are institutions that are sure that best practices become commonly held practices so that the people of a community benefit from them. That's going to be our emphasis, and that's because we emphasize the importance of teaching, not just the importance of research. Both together in tandem is the formula for success. So strengthening the engagement with our community is the last thing I want to mention, and perhaps the most important, because I believe every great university in this country, every single great university in this country is engaged in its community. Our goal is to bring the university to the community, and just importantly, to bring the community to the university, because it's that alliance, that connection, that interconnectivity between universities and their communities that make great universities even greater and allow terrific communities to thrive to an even greater degree as well. So innovation and student success are at the heart of our mission. Leveraging and lifting the successes of the past will be our emphasis. I hope that, like the strategic plan of USM, that Towson University goes from eminence to preeminence, just like we will take the entire system. Before I came to Towson and before I met with the search committee and then with you as the Board of Regents, I read very carefully the strategic plans. And I can't tell you every line and every phrase that was in there, but what really stood out to me and what I remember more than anything else is the theme of that plan of going from eminence to preeminence. That's what great universities do. They go from being great to even greater. So I look forward to working with all of you. I'm just thrilled to be part of this community. I'm thrilled to return professionally, although my residence has always been here, to return professionally to the state that's been my home for 40 years. And I look forward to TU becoming an even greater university in the future. So we say together at Towson that Towson is a place where excellence is earned, but we also say, go Tigers, go Tigers. Thank you very much.
Good.
We'll now have our safety moment presented by Chief Hearing. Good morning.
Good morning. Welcome to Towson. Thank you for having me here. I've been asked to present on a safety topic that's unique to Towson. And what I've chosen to discuss with you and make you aware of is the communication and preparation that we do here at Towson. It's low tech. You probably all had your fill of high tech solutions to the problems that we face, and they're certainly needed. But I've been at Towson for 23 years. And one of the unique things that we do here at Towson is the Office of Public Safety has a voice and a seat at the President's Cabinet. And we're there in a limited role to pay attention and, where appropriate, provide input to the hard work that they do at the President's Cabinet. One of the unintended results that have occurred, I believe, is that I've been able to forge good relationships with all the members at the President's Cabinet, and that has resulted in outstanding communication and our ability to be better prepared for the various challenges that occur sometimes on a daily basis here on our campus. In 23 years, we've seen a lot of change with the approach to public safety on a campus in a university. I like to believe that we do that well here. We provide a support service, which is to further the mission of the overall mission of the university, where we work hard at the senior leadership level to build those relationships and have frank discussions about issues and problems when they occur. But that has a trickle-down effect within the organization, within my supervisors, my command staff, and my officers on the street, and they have gone out and built those same relationships with the community that we serve. And the result of that is that we don't see each other for the first time or on occasion. We see each other frequently, and we have all those conversations and discussions that you need to have to build a relationship so that when you're in crisis, You're not trying to figure out who it is that you're talking to or whose decisions or input you're relying on. You're able to do that. The reason we're so successful at Towson with regards to providing a safe and secure campus for the university is the community that we serve, many of whom are represented here today. Without those relationships, our crime statistics would be out through the roof. We would be constantly in turmoil with our community. We don't have that. We have conversations that identify problems when they occur. We have people that call our dispatch center on the operational level and let us know when something's not appears to be right, isn't going right, which lets us to respond. And 99% of the time, there's a perfectly innocent and reasonable explanation for that. The other benefit is that, and by the way, I do report up to the president, but I do that through the vice president of administration and finance, Ben Lowenthal. One of the other benefits of this relationship is that we're able to have frank discussions with the entire leadership group about budgetary needs and priorities when it comes to public safety. We're not pushing our voice forward from a position of disadvantage. That's my presentation for you. It's a short topic. I'm happy to take any questions if you have it about anything specific at this point.
Any questions for Chief Hearing? Yes, Bill.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
How do you turn this? Is it on?
It's on.
Oh,
I think they're all hot as a reminder.
if there should be a emergency that would involve first responders from different departments, fire department, police department, and so forth, or if it would expand to other parts of the system, is there a radio frequency that you all communicate on so that each department who is responding as a first responder to an emergency can communicate with each other? I asked that question because in the District of Columbia, they had a catastrophic event, and their biggest problem was they weren't able to communicate because they didn't have a common frequency.
That's a very good question, sir. I'm happy to report that at Towson, we have the ability to communicate with any other law enforcement agency or first responding agency in the state of Maryland. That seems like a pretty grand statement, but we're on the 700 megahertz statewide system. We operate a separate, it's called an ASR. It's the brain of the system. We operate a separate ASR on our campus, which serves our campus, but it also supports the other statewide agencies that come through this region. We have complete interoperability with Baltimore County Police, who are our primary allied agency. We exercise the ability to, it's called generically a patch, to throw that patch to be able to talk to them once a week, once a month on the weekend. And we do it as needed for different events that occur on campus. My officers have the ability to go out and talk to their counterparts that are patrolling the area. We have concurrent jurisdiction in some areas around Towson, and they have, of course, concurrent jurisdiction on our campus. And we have frequently responded together to emergency situations on campus. And that, of course, extends out to the fire department. We frequently have to meet the fire department to bring them into our campus because it's not just the Towson firehouse that responds to events on campus. They'll come from pretty far away sometimes, the volunteers, and we have to guide them in and that type of thing. I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Chief Hearing? Okay, seeing none, thank
All right,
you very
thank you.
much for our first safety moment.
Thank you.
And now we're going to, move to the Education Forum, and Regent McMillan will introduce our guests. Mhm.
It's an honor for me to introduce Keith White, who's the executive director of the National Council on Problem Gambling, who spent 25 years of his career working on these issues and also a friend. Let me give some perspective here. I first really my first experience really was sports betting, was back when I was at Oxford. I would go down to London to watch the Cambridge Oxford boat race. I'm sure, Kurt, you might have done that as well. And millions of people on the Thames River watching this very important event. But here's the thing, millions of dollars was being bet legally on that event in England. Now, fast forward to 2018, the United States has legalized sports betting across this country. In between that period at Oxford and today, you'd be hard pressed to find sports betting on any campus around the world except the United States of America. And that is really the threat. This country now is really just engulfed in sports betting. Everybody's concerned about it, the NCAA. Maryland, who just recently adopted it, had $4 billion bet last year on online betting. So this is really, really serious stuff. I call Keith the Paul Revere because he's not warning us of a British invasion. He's warning us of the severe risk of sports betting on campuses in America. So with that, thank you very much, Kevin.
Thank you, Tom. And thank you to the USM Regents for having me here this morning. I'd like to be fairly brief in case there are questions, and we're certainly available for follow-up afterwards. I'd also like to introduce Mary Drexler, the Executive Director of the Maryland Center of Excellence, and she'll help during the Q&A session, especially if you have questions specific to Maryland sports betting. So let me just pull my slides up very quickly. And, well, they were here. I'm sure they still are here. Sorry. This is not my computer. So if someone could help me find them, I would greatly appreciate it. Oh, there it is. Exactly. Well, click on the PowerPoint. That might be the you can tell I'm not an alum of the university system here. So you can blame Hampden City College in Farmville, Virginia for my inability to operate PowerPoint. We are Tigers as well. My wife is an alumni of the university, so we're both Tigers. She here, of course, at Towson, and myself at the Hampden City University. So, without further ado, this is not a presentation on gambling or gambling addiction, right? So, I'm going to try and keep it very short and to the allotted time. Certainly, myself and Mary have a lot more information on the basics, but in the moment, as Tom said, the expansion of sports betting is one of the biggest issues in our field, and we believe in yours as well. So what we think, respectfully, USM Regents need to know is that this massive nationwide expansion of sports betting, the increases in availability, advertising, accessibility, lead us to two premises. One, that the high rates of gambling participation and gambling problems, plus the poor gambling literacy among your young sports bettors. And two, that student athletes routinely violate NCAA gambling rules and your own state laws. And as a result, that's shifting a lot of risk into your system, and not just amongst your students, but amongst particularly your student athletes. And so we'll talk about that a little bit more. So again, there's a lot that goes into gambling and gambling addiction, but just to help set the stage, as we all know, Maryland has never been shy about legalized gambling. And now you have as many forms of legalized gambling as Nevada, plus one, because they still don't have a lottery, which you do. Participation wise, over 90% of Marylanders reported that they've ever gambled. And in the most recent surveys conducted by Mary's organization, 30% had ever participated in sports betting, which includes both regular, or if you will, regular sports betting and fantasy sports. So amongst Maryland adults, roughly 4% met criteria for gambling problems in the past year. That is somewhat higher than the national average of 2.2%.
So there's a lot of gambling participation in Maryland. There's a lot of exposure to problems. And frankly, there's at least a base rate of problems around 4%. And importantly for this presentation, again, this is not a general gambling presentation. If you participate in sports betting, you are much more likely to have gambling problems. So there's an association, at least in this current time, with those who participate in sports betting and those who are likely to have gambling problems. We can talk a little bit more about the differences in that vertical, but this is not unique to Maryland. This is found across the country and frankly around the world. But unfortunately, a very small percentage of people who have problems report ever seeking treatment. And so it creates an enormous public health problem. So just to frame a little bit as we look at sports betting. So since 2018, as Tom mentioned, the Supreme Court overturned a law that prohibited states from legalizing sports betting. And so since that prohibition was overturned, we're 33 states plus District of Columbia and Puerto Rico have legalized sports betting. My state of Virginia did it in 2020. You guys did it fairly recently, soon after. Over 250 billion has been legally bet on sports in America. And the big asterisk there is that there is still uncounted tens or hundreds of billions in illegal sports betting. So the neighborhood bookies have not gone away. There's still a lot of ways to participate offshore. And so 250 billion is absolutely certainly an undercount. And that includes 30 billion that's been legally bet on the performance of amateur, often underage athletes. We are, of course, the only country in the world that places such a large percentage of our sports betting market on the backs of those who are not professionals. And that creates, of course, some systemic risk. And as you've probably seen here and everywhere, anybody that watches sports now, anybody that listens to the TV or radio has been bombarded by gambling advertising, 2.5 billion just on the advertising of sports betting. That has grown and roughly doubled every single year since 2018 and shows no signs of slowing down. And we always say that while gambling is primarily legalized and regulated as a state issue, there is not one, but two specific federal taxes on gambling. And the excise tax on sports betting alone has brought more than $100 million to the federal government since 2018. So what you may or may not know, and if you're not a big sports bettor, you wouldn't know this, is that every single sports bet placed in the United States, there is a small federal excise tax that goes to the federal government. So please don't let anybody tell you that it's only a Maryland issue or only a Maryland problem, or that these solutions can only have to come from and through Maryland gambling tax revenue. The federal government has and should be playing a much bigger role because, of course, they're profiting from not just gambling, but sports betting specifically. So to try and frame a little bit the moment that we're in, how large this is getting and how quickly, these are statistics from GeoComply, which is a geolocation service. They check that if you're betting online, you're where you're supposed to be. So 242 million geolocation transactions on week one of this NFL season. So that equates to at least 250 million bets that were placed in the span of the opening week of the NFL season, which is again doubled from the previous year. And mind you, these are only online sports bets. And so while, of course, most people now, when they have the opportunity, are going to bet online, that's just capturing the online bets. That's not people who've gone down to the horseshoe. It's not people that are betting with their corner bookies. And just some Maryland specific, because you're fairly new for sports betting and online sports betting, there are 12.7 million geolocation checks in week one of the NFL season, which equates to about 388,000 active accounts. And during that 5-day period, the opening week of the NFL season, 61,000 new online gambling accounts were created just in that week. And again, Maryland's not exceptional, but Maryland is, I think, representative of the surge in participation in sports betting. And the thing I think that I'd like to talk to you about a little bit is that the sports betting us grew up with is not what you see today. So we call it the supersized sports betting because there are now hundreds of games available every single day, 24/7. So you can bet around the clock into European and Asian markets, and then it comes back to the United States, and then you just go around and around. There are thousands of bettable events within each game now that we have basically proposition style or in-play betting. You also have some exotic things called single game parlays and in-game daily fantasy. Well, I won't get into the technical, the legal, and difficulties of this, but it is to say, very soon you're going to be able to bet theoretically on every single action by every single player on every play in every game in every sport. This is something that no one in the world has ever had at their fingertips, and now, of course, it's all through your phone. 50% of that total, 250 billion in revenue and participation, is on these in-play events. When I grew up, you placed a bet on Tuesday for the Sunday afternoon football game. So you waited days in between making the bet and seeing whether or not you won. Now, of course, for this younger generation, waiting 3 days for the outcome of anything is absolutely unacceptable. You can't wait 3 minutes. And now, of course, the industry is going to cater to that need. And I should mention that sometimes bookies would give you illegal credit. Now, of course, most people deposit and play through credit cards or other forms of non-cash, which creates, as we were saying earlier, some additional risks, let's just say. So don't take it from us. As Tom said, the NCAA has been cognizant of these issues for a long time. This is a survey from April of 2023, where 58% of folks in the high risk age group, that 18 to 22, basically the student population, if you will, have placed at least one sports bet in the past year. Interestingly enough, and something we find in no other country and in no other form of gambling around the world. So for lottery play, for casino play, racing, charitable, everything else that Marylanders gamble on, the higher your education, the less likely you are to bet. Not sports betting. At least in this moment, and it may change as sports betting expands, the higher your education, the more likely you are to bet sports betting. To the effect that even on campus here, undergraduates bet sports very frequently, but graduate students bet more. And so there's an association, I think, of not just education, but university athletics leading to perhaps familiarity with. And maybe if you're very familiar with the game, and you're smarter and you're a graduate student, you're more likely to think that your knowledge is going to allow you to place a bet on the outcome. And so, and just to extend it, high school graduates bet sports less than college graduates who bet sports less than graduate students. So it's an absolutely perfect curve. It's something that's a little bit unusual. Again, not just in other forms of gambling, but anywhere else in the world. Everywhere else in the world, sports betting in the UK, as Tom said, is negatively associated with income, but not in the United States. So it is something, as we say, again, it is of unique concern, I would believe, to universities and certainly to the USM system. No surprise, the risk is concentrated. Young male online sports bettors is the shorthand, but as you'll see from the NCAA survey, not everybody bets sports. Roughly 58% of college students report betting. There's a subset, that this 16% subset of high risk bettors are betting frequently, which is an association with gambling addiction, are betting higher amounts. $50 may not seem a lot for us, but I think for many undergraduates it is. And then losing more than $500 betting on sports in a single day. I know as a college student, as a scholarship student, I could not have afforded that level of loss. And I think there's a lot of kids that cannot. And when you look at this, again, the 16% of high risk bettors, you'll see that 70% believe that they could win a lot of money when they consistently gamble. This is actually demonstrably false. The longer you gamble, the more likely you are to lose because the odds are, of course, against you over time. And 80% of these high-risk gamblers, this 16% of 18 to 22-year-olds on campus, report that seeing ads make them more likely to gamble. You know, we know that there is an effect of this saturation of advertising. So this chart here is from our own survey of 25,000 individuals nationwide, 18 plus. And what you'll see is what we call this concentration of risk among this same 18 to 24-year-old group. And so the blue bars are gamblers who said at least one time to a problematic play indicator. This is something like, I've often gambled until my money is gone. Gambling, I'm preoccupied by gambling. I lose sleep, and most importantly, perhaps, I'm unable to stop. If I try and quit or stop gambling, I can't do it. So they're not, I want to be very clear. This is not a diagnosis of gambling addiction. This is a large, telephone and online survey, but these risk factors are, of course, tightly associated with gambling problems. So if you're saying yes, in the past year to at least one of those, 19% of 18 to 24-year-olds, and it scales down to almost none of 65 plus. But the same curve is just opposite. The orange bars are people who agree gambling is not a good way to make money. So, we're hoping that you agree with this question. So 80% of our elders agree, yeah, gambling's not a good way to make money, but only 27%, essentially only 27% of your college students, if asked, agree gambling's not a good way to make money. 50%, I'll break down the numbers for the 18 to 24, 50% of kids 18 to 24 say gambling is a good way to make money, and 25% are unsure. And then the other 27% say, no, it's not a good way to make money. So in terms of gambling literacy, if you will, that's terrifying because they are functionally illiterate when it comes to the basic math, which is an iron law. And so they're coming into this gambling participation with a tremendous amount of misinformation. And they're probably not getting a lot from their educational system either. Not to blame the USM system, but very few colleges around the country have any sort of comprehensive gambling addiction prevention or education program. So we're really not equipping these kids well to deal with the tsunami of advertising and action and availability, sports betting. Again, it is in the moment. There's a massive gambling scandal going on in the Iowa system. Over 40 athletes have been identified as gambling illegally, gambling underage. The previous NCAA study shows that 90% of male student athletes who bet on sports, which is absolutely verboten in the NCAA regulations, 90% of those who tell the NCAA itself that they're betting on sports began prior to college and 25% prior to high school. So if we're waiting until, frankly, they get to the pros, but in some cases, if we're only waiting till they enter the university system, and as we know, we're not doing a lot there, we're failing this generation. We're failing to protect them, and we're letting them develop, frankly, a lot of gambling habits that may lead to problems without much opportunity to correct that a little bit. So approximately a quarter of male student athletes report breaking the NCAA rules. And again, this is self-report to the NCAA. So I would suspect that's an underestimate. This is from a more recent NCAA survey, the April 2023 one I mentioned. 41% of college students report they've bet on sports. 41% of college students who bet sports, which is the majority, report they've bet on their own team. And the statistics don't tell us whether they've bet for or against their own team, but they're betting on things they know and on people they know and on the performance of people they know and perhaps on the performance of someone they're dating, a roommate, someone that's in their class, someone that's associated close to them. And of course, the more you know, the more you think your bet's more likely to win. So, but there's an integrity issue here. There's a public health issue. There's a safety issue, quite frankly, here. As we know, harassment is on the rise among aggrieved bettors who will then reach out, criticize, attack someone who missed a 3-point shot that would have covered the spread. And it may well be the aggrieved bettor may well be your roommate, your fraternity brother, or sorority sister. And 34%, according to the NCAA, have bet with a bookmaker who's a fellow student. Like I said, the legalization of sports betting has not eliminated the offshore illegal market. Of course, if you bet with the illegal folks, you don't pay taxes. You don't have to identify anybody. They may be willing to extend you credit. In many cases, there's access for college students. So this problem is not confined to the legal regulated sports books that we see here in Maryland. This problem is on your campus as well, amongst your fellow students who are betting with each other on the performance of other fellow students. And Maryland, of course, is not immune. Some of you who've been around this issue for a while remember in 1995, there was a gambling scandal among University of Maryland student athletes. Your starting quarterback was suspended for originally 8 games for gambling. It was reduced to 4, and a number of other players were implicated as well. And the headlines from that time were that the University of Maryland is learning from its mistakes and is launching a comprehensive gambling educational and integrity program. And I think perhaps in the years since that, that program is no longer extant, as we see no record of it. But we would encourage you to revisit that program, of course. And you may be asking me now, if especially someone in the University of Maryland system who maybe has the opportunity to go pro, as many Maryland players do, why would they take that chance? Why would they take that risk? And one of the things we would submit to you is that people often bet with their heart, not their head. And of course, many of the factors that make you an elite athlete are also traits that make you a very, very risky gambler. And it's not just gender, although of course, men do tend to gamble and take a lot more risk. It's many of the sports-specific psychological perspectives. They're extremely competitive. They believe in their own skill. They have higher rates of risk-taking behavior with many of the other things that we are thinking about. But the thing I'd like to single out to you very, very quickly is one of the bigger ones is injuries or separation from the team. So many of the people who get into trouble with gambling scandals, like Calvin here in the NFL, didn't really gamble a lot until he was injured. He was on injured reserve, so he was separated from that close team environment. I mean, imagine almost being ripped from this fraternity, this sorority of people that you're so tightly bonded with, but now that you're injured, you're unable to be with the team. And he turned to gambling as a coping mechanism. It's not a great coping mechanism, but it's very easy. And it's easy to stay connected with your friends because you can still play cards. You can still bet online with them. You can talk with them, but while you're separated from the team. So we would, as we talk about the details of gambling addiction education, talking to the physical therapist, talking to the wellness, that's when you're going to perhaps see a lot of signs of risk amongst student athletes when they're injured, when they're separated from the team. So I won't go through these questions. I want to be respectful of the time and leave some time for questions. But we posed some questions for you as regents that you may wish to consider as you look at the level of gambling education, prevention, awareness programs for students and student athletes across USM. Do you know, frankly, how many are gambling? Because most systems don't add gambling questions into your normal health life, campus life screening. So we suspect you probably may not know how many gamble. And of course, you'd want to screen for some of those questions, like, are you often gambling until your last dollar's gone and things. How do you actually change behavior? We don't have a lot of good science. We think we know how to do good addiction prevention, but it's not just to say, oh, we do this for alcohol and tobacco, so it should work for gambling. Gambling is highly related, but it is different. The substance that people with gambling problems abuse is money. And you can't limit access to money. And of course, these days you can't limit access to credit. You can't get high on drugs you don't have. You can absolutely gamble with money you do not have. There's a lot more. Again, I won't go through all these questions, but what would you do if a student athlete came forward, especially if a student athlete came forward and said, I have gambled in a way that I would lose my eligibility for life. I've violated NCAA gambling rules. I've bet on my own team, as 40% of students report they're doing to the NCAA itself. If you've bet on your own team, that's anathema. But what would you do from the health perspective if they say, and I've bet because I've lost control? It's not greed. I have a serious psychological problem. Where would we go here in Maryland, here at Towson, or here in the state? And so there's a lot of other stuff on the policy and procedures level. But so brief suggestions is that the evidence shows overwhelmingly that your students and your student athletes are gambling. The majority of them are gambling, and they're betting on sports, a significant minority of them. And so you have to avoid abstinence and zero tolerance approaches. Most of the education and information over the last 30 years provided by NCAA and others is essentially the equivalent of just say no for gambling. They're coming to you. They've walked right past that already. They've started gambling in high school. So please try and stay away from the more basic tropes of just don't bet on it, which is the name of the NCAA's program. Well, just don't bet on it applies to roughly 20% of their athletes. The other 80% have said, well, we're already betting on it. So what do you have for me now? So you can't do abstinence and zero tolerance based approaches. This is a public health issue and you need to address it as a public health problem. Harm minimization and other terms that we use a lot for substance abuse are very, very applicable here, even though there is, of course, still an integrity concern amongst your student athletes. But please don't confuse the integrity concern about sports betting amongst student athletes with the more general, holistic public health approach you must take to the very, very, very high rates of gambling participation that are already on your campus. And then, of course, you have to invest in this. Maryland had a scandal back in the early 1990s and made steps to invest. But perhaps that the intention, that focus that was raised by that scandal has dwindled a little bit in this moment when, as Tom said, $4 billion has been bet last year in Maryland. How much are you investing in gambling addiction prevention, education, treatment, enforcement, research, responsible gambling, and recovery? Making sure that if someone does have a gambling problem, if a young person on campus, a faculty member, some of their family have a problem, they can return themselves to a healthy way of living with support. Very few people can beat addiction completely on their own. Yet Maryland has a very, very, very good peer support recovery system that Mary can talk about, but it doesn't really fully extend, I think, to many of the campus folks. And so we're here to help. And we're happy to answer any questions, a couple resources for you, but we appreciate your time and energy. And I would just like to say that two things: we're neutral on legalized gambling. So we don't have skin in this game one way or the other. The state of Maryland has legalized and profits from gambling, and that's perfectly appropriate and fine. We just want to make sure that anybody who gambles receives an opportunity also to minimize their risk. We work with everybody across the spectrum, including the gambling industry. And as we are observing veterans day to day, as we've talked about earlier, those same traits that make athletes perhaps a little bit more vulnerable to gambling problems also extend to service personnel and their families. So we know veterans have twice the rate of gambling problems because they tend to be young, male, risk-taking, high association with others with substance use and abuse. So it's very just and appropriate today to not just honor those who serve, to make sure that we're honoring the commitment we have to help protect their health and wellness, especially for those who served. So thank you very much, and we're happy to answer any questions.
So, Chief, thank you for a very informative presentation. I will now open it up for questions. Anwar and then Ellen.
Thank you. It was very
And I-
informative. Can you hear me?
Mhm.
First question I have: what's the benefit universities get from discouraging or encouraging gambling on the campuses? And why there's no campaign like we have seen on the smoking side? Was campaign about the consequences of smoking and trying to prevent students or the adults to stay away from that. I don't see any of those things being sort of projected or promoted in the campuses. And the third question, there are three parts. What are the consequences? I know you have shown us some more on a anecdotal basis, the consequences, but has there been any trend tracking of issues related to the students getting in a fight or students getting drop off from the campuses because of losing money or any other aspect which is connected to the gambling? Thank you.
Absolutely. No, thank you for your question. So I think the last part first, the consequences are often hidden. So students who have misused student loan money or declared bankruptcy or who've dropped out of the system because of lack of funds, a hidden gambling problem may be underlying that, but we don't ask it. We don't ask on a bankruptcy petition. We don't know why your credit card is overextended. So financial issues are a large consequence of gambling problems. Of course, there are other consequences related to substance abuse and addiction issues, mental health issues. But I think one of the things we don't see is that we call this the hidden addiction. There are no outward physical signs. The statistics would show that at least 5% of Marylanders in that 18 to 22-year-old age range have gambling problems. So perhaps 5% of the students here at Towson meet some criteria for gambling problems. But what you see is that they are getting in fights. It's the cause that is often hidden. So they're getting into financial problems. And Mary may be able to talk about some of the more specific, consequences. But I think in terms of the benefit, well, let's be honest, the state of Maryland devotes most of its gambling, most of its lottery revenue to education. So I think the university is a very direct beneficiary from gambling. And sometimes that makes state government, to be respectful, but realistic, sometimes it makes them reluctant to address gambling the same way you would other health issues. The fact that gambling generates such highly visible, very lucrative profits occasionally can make a state government reluctant. But the USM system certainly has the authority and the opportunity to make sure that you're protecting all those who you serve, even where the state is reluctant. So Mary's funding for the Maryland Center of Excellence is, I think, roughly $5 million out of the $4 billion. I think we can do a better job at adjusting that ratio to make sure we have comprehensive programs. And Mary's doing great with what she has. So the Maryland Center of Excellence can provide some of those programs. But in the past, the university system has not been necessarily very interested. And nor is anybody really funded to make sure that every single student has a gambling addiction prevention message. We're still far from that as a society. If that answers your questions,
Is there an institution or a system that you would say from a best practices standpoint stands out?
No. The short answer is no. And because, of course, as advocates, we always encourage more. We think that there can always be more done. I would note that Towson University received a grant from the National Council a year ago that was funded by the National Football League to help develop on-campus prevention resources specifically aimed at Greek life and at student athletics. And while we only have the preliminary results, the athletics department resisted. They said the Towson University student wellness who received the grant said, we have a grant from the National Council on Problem Gambling supported by the NFL. Can we come in and talk to your athletes? And they were told it's not really a priority. And I don't mean I'm not dunking on TU here. Of course they have other priorities. This was not one of them. And so they were not able to do as much education as we'd funded them to do, simply because there was not as much time available to speak to all the student athletes, not just male student athletes, but female student athletes across all the sports. They weren't able to perform to the grant potential because they weren't able to access most of the student athletes. And that is not an uncommon problem. So there's glimmers out there. We'd hope Towson could be a model for education, and I think it still may be as we see the full results. But there has to be partnership both ways.
The response is telling and disappointing.
It's okay. We are still optimistic, and we still think there is a lot of opportunity. And as sports betting becomes more and more visible, we have the chance here to speak to you in a way that we haven't had before. So we are eternal optimists that we can always continue to, form an ever more perfect gambling addiction prevention system.
I read a rather interesting article a few months ago, reference to cheating in tennis.
Oh.
And the key to it, I think, was access to a certain number of players, especially those who were not highly ranked. And if you translate that to a university campus, you have tremendous access to athletes.
Yes.
Other students. And most of those students are not going to be professional athletes. So it's an environment I think is ripe for potential cheating if you translate the tennis story to what could potentially happen on university campus. Have you seen incidents of that? Is that a concern or problem you see?
Absolutely. Tom and I have talked about this a lot. We think the program, the scandal that's coming is less likely to be in a Division I school in a power sport where there is more scrutiny, where I think many of those athletes, as you say, may have an expectation they're going to go professional. I think the scandal is going to come in a D2 or D3 institution. It's going to come in a non-power sport. We saw there's a big scandal right now in Alabama baseball where the coach was caught on tape talking to another coach about who the starting pitcher was at the sports book as he was placing a bet against his own team. And, so we see actually there's an enormous market in women's volleyball. And I would say as women's sports come to the fore, there's less scrutiny. There's certainly less, there's more opportunities for someone to fix a game because the money is a lot less. But there's still a market on it somewhere internationally. There's a market on, obscure tennis qualifiers. There's a market on table tennis and rugby, women's volleyball. So that's where we suspect there's a lot more, not just opportunity to fix, but incentive to fix. And with in-play betting now, you don't just have to fix the outcome of a game. Now you can fix the outcome of a pass. So proposition bets, one of the big issues right now within college athletics is, are you going to prohibit proposition bets on the performance of an individual player or an individual play? Will the field goal kicker make or miss this point? Will there be a penalty on this particular play? So we see in the closest analog in world sports is in soccer in the UK, which is their national sport. You can bet on whether or not a certain player will get a yellow card or take a penalty within a certain amount of time. And they've had just massive problems with fixing, because of course, if you decide you're gonna take that penalty, you wait till the 50th minute, and all your mates have bet lots of money on the fact that you're going to get a yellow card, and voila, you just receive a yellow card. They all win, but of course, the integrity monitors are gonna fix that. And this is a nationally televised sport at the highest division. Imagine the opportunity for a young athlete in a smaller sport to fix where there's a market placed on their individual performance. It's I think Tom's right. I may not be the Paul Revere, but we do think there's enormous potential.
Okay. Q.
I'm going to follow up on Ike's comments. It seems to me that there's two really, I guess, constituencies that are in play. One is our student bodies at large and the impact that has. But Ike's speaking more to the potential risk of the participating student athletes, particularly at our Division I schools or that. And this is not a question necessarily for Keith, but I'm just wondering. I think the NFL, I believe, has your organization come in every year and counsel certainly rookies or other people on the impact what could happen to them if they get into gambling. I'm just wondering whether any of that occurs at our universities at a Division I level, where we're actually, educating our athletes about the risks that are going on. And I realize that's a small percentage of our student body, but certainly that's the entire integrity of all of our sports are at play if this grows and becomes really a cancer.
Well, the NCAA has funded a program that they now have a suite of online resources that your athletic department can utilize. Athletic departments are required to provide a compliance training every year, but it's compliance training. This is not necessarily gambling addiction prevention. This is more about following the rules, and it's more about integrity of the game than the health of the athlete. So the NCAA also has funded a group called Epic Risk Management, who will come in and do a in-person seminar with some lived experience. We think that kind of awareness is good, but it's far from a comprehensive program. It's a one and done. Come in, they deliver their message, and they leave again. And so it's up to the university to then carry the other 364 days of the year. And again, groups like the Maryland Center of Excellence on Problem Gambling here in the state can provide that fill-in education. Because just as you would not expect one seminar for 1 hour to cover every single student athlete's alcohol, perhaps problems, you shouldn't expect the same with gambling. But it's a start. And we're happy to help fill in the rest of those gaps.
Do any of the presidents want to comment? Daryl?
Thank you.
Daryl.
Okay. So thank you for the presentation. I'm really upset that you put College Park in there from 1995. But,
It was risky. It
needs to be current though. Make it current. So just you should also know. So there's a movement to do a lot of training. I'm on the NCAA Division I Board of Directors. We just had a council meeting 2 days ago. And so new regulatory guidance will be coming out, 1 year suspensions. loss of eligibility based on certain levels of betting. So just letting you know that's about to get approved. That's just NCAA. In my conference, the Big Ten Conference, our rules would be even more strict. And we're just about to have a process for that to be executed in the next few months. And then finally, the Big Ten is going to do its own training of all student athletes for all sports in this space. So you're right, it's a problem. But remember, there's 520,000 student athletes in the NCAA. So the large majority of them are not doing this. I just want to also level set to the community. Yes, it's becoming an emerging problem, even in the Big Ten. Just recently, Iowa was implicated on their football team. 2 players were suspended for the rest of the season because of betting on games. But again, a small fraction of the actual players. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Tom?
Yeah, so I've had several conversations with Charlie Baker when he took the job about how this is really, truly an existential threat. And, you know, you have to put it in perspective. We're the only nation in the world where there's big time sports betting going on our campuses. I mean, it doesn't happen anywhere else. And to me, that marriage is very problematic. And so, crystal ball, you've been at this 25 years. What does it look like 5 years from now in your best estimation? Because a lot of this stuff is almost impossible to stop. Like you talked about the prop betting and so forth. How do you, if you had to crystal ball out 5 years, you know, and all the, you know, the kids in the locker room, some making a lot of money from NIL, some not making money. There's so many forces here, but just crystal ball what you think is going to look like in 5 years.
Well, so I won't speak on behalf of the National Council on this point, but this may be the straw that breaks the back of college athletics, of amateurism. There's just simply, this system was never designed to handle $30 billion in bets and it growing exponentially every year. You know, we may well be at $100 billion in bets on the results of amateur competitions in 5 years. That would be, at the current growth rate, that's well within the margin. And at $100 billion spent on performance, it's almost impossible to see how the construct of this system survives that injection of money. So that's just me personally. Again, we work well with the NCAA. We work well with all of you. So putting back on my national council hat, there are scandals now that you've just not detected. Because right now, almost all integrity enforcement monitoring, it looks at suspicious movements in the betting markets. But to suspiciously move a betting market, that means the fix is already in. That means someone's betting heavy on my performance or a college's performance because they believe they've already fixed the outcome. So the horse is already out of the barn, and integrity monitoring is critical. And there's some amazing stuff we can do now with data, but that means someone has already agreed to fix, and they've told someone else who's now placing bets on that outcome. And so when you look at suspicious line movement, that's 3 steps down the road. What we're not doing a good enough job of is doing the prevention and education awareness and trying to prevent someone from getting themselves jammed up. And I should note too, it's not just student athletes. Tom and I have talked about this a lot. It's your video monitoring assistants, your referees, your coaches. The Alabama scandal was a coach who was betting, on or even against his own team. So I do think there will be a scandal. I think it will, unfortunately, because gambling addiction, to your question earlier, is highly correlated with negative outcomes up to and including suicide. So you may well have a life-threatening incident by a high-profile or lower-profile student athlete. We see this certainly in the pros. There have been a number of suicides among professional players tied directly to their gambling problems. And it's unfortunate, but I think that might be what it takes to jolt everyone out of this complacency and better balance the costs and benefits, better balance the revenue and the risk and the responsibility, because the money's there. It's an unworldly amount of money. It's just we as perhaps a society, as a state, as an institution have not chosen to allocate it. We've not picked the right balance, because gambling's always been underground. But now, in the past 5 years, it's way above ground, but our systems haven't quite adjusted. So, Tom, I think to that's your point. The last thing I would say is that there will likely be federal discussion, just as Congress created the law to prohibit sports betting in the states and the Supreme Court overturned it. I think as this issue grows, Congress, and you've served in that body, will take it upon themselves to consider it again. So there might well be federal regulations. There might be a discussion about advertising and college partnerships. As we know, Maryland passed a state law to rescind its partnerships with sports betting and universities, but that means the other 49 states still can. They've just chosen not to at the moment. So I don't know if that helps, but that's where we may see things.
Anwar's going to get the last question.
Please.
Yeah, the question I have, are you pursuing or lobbying the state leadership in this case? Because obviously if they come up with a legislation or direction, that certainly impact the state universities. I mean, what I want to just say, our value proposition is wrong in a way that when we legalized gambling in Maryland, we said, oh, the money is going to benefit the schools and colleges or universities. I think that's where leadership probably failed, in my view, is sort of connecting the two together. And then everybody looks at, oh, it's a good money coming in, but it's not. I mean, it's ruining the families, it's ruining the students, it's ruining across the board in the state of Maryland. So it's unfortunate, but I think we should need to push them to look at recourse and change the course of action. So that's my.
Well, thank you. No, and so I would just say, I think they'll listen to you a lot more than they've listened to us. But your voice carries enormous weight. And, through the Center of Excellence, we certainly hope to encourage everybody to have a more balanced relationship with gambling, just as we generally have with alcohol. But again, it's going to take a while, I think, for everyone to catch up with that. So we're here to help, and we're here certainly to support you in helping talk to the legislature and talk to all the stakeholders. And again, I think there's enormous opportunities to create that sort of positive change, and to have Maryland, frankly, become a leader. That would serve not just you and your students and faculty well, but the entire nation. We're looking for those leaders. And so there's a tremendous opportunity to harness those talents and resources we have here to help everyone to do a better job. So thank you very much.
Keith, thank you for a very. We'll now have the chancellor's report.
Thank you, Chair Gooden. First, to Towson University and new President Mark Ginsburg, thank you for hosting us today. I had the pleasure of joining Towson last Wednesday in a welcome reception when President Ginsburg arrived. And I returned 2 days later for a timely, terrific, system-wide symposium on civic education and engagement. Thank you for hosting that. I know that President Ginsburg has been on a listening tour with the TU community to form a compelling collaborative vision of Towson's future. That future starts now with national recognitions for inclusive academic excellence. We heard about the largest incoming class in TU history. It starts with the communities, the broader communities, full faith in the greatness of this university. So again, you've been welcomed, you've been congratulated, but one more time. I have more leadership transitions to acknowledge. As you know, Patrick Hogan, former Vice Chancellor for Government Relations, left the USM last month to join Cornerstone Government Affairs. We're grateful for Patrick's invaluable service to the system. Susan Lawrence, Director of Government Affairs at the University of Maryland, Baltimore, will take on the vice chancellorship early next month. I was lucky to work with Ms. Lawrence at UMB. I'm confident that her long administrative experience in the Maryland Senate and her deep knowledge of the system will benefit us greatly. And I want to thank Assistant Vice Chancellor Andy Clark for serving in the interim role during this 1 month period at a critical time in the legislative calendar as we approach the 2024 session. I have one more transition to announce. This week, Tim McDonough, our Vice Chancellor for Marketing and Communications, shared that he'll leave the USM next month to become Senior Vice President at NACUBO. Tim, we all thank you for your dedicated service to the system, to our universities, and we wish you the best in this exciting, very important new role. Thank you. Nan Mulqueen, our Director of Executive Communications, will take on the interim vice chancellorship, and Senior Vice Chancellor Ellen Herbst will steer our marketing and branding campaign, which we must keep on track while we find Tim's successor. So thank you to Nan and Ellen. Now let me pivot to the excellence of our universities. I want to start with a few of our universities together, because I think that's when we're at our best. Last month, President Biden announced that from a pool of 400 applications, the greater Baltimore region has been named one of 31 federal tech hubs. The Baltimore consortium that pursued this designation includes UMB, Coppin State, Towson, UMBC. The hub exploits one of the system's great strengths, artificial intelligence intersecting with biotechnology. It emphasizes personalized medicine, predictive health, and this designation promises billions of dollars in investment, federal and otherwise. It promises economic growth, innovation, equitable opportunity. It promises to revolutionize human health and wellness. And I want to thank every one of our leaders who brought this opportunity home. Of course, we just got another huge win 48 hours ago. The consolidated FBI headquarters are coming to Greenbelt. We contributed to this. The system contributed to this. To lure the agency to Maryland, nearly all of our universities have volunteered their research capabilities in dozens of FBI domains and their capacity to supply and train the FBI workforce. 7 long years ago, UMB and College Park launched a joint terrorism and counterterrorism academy to serve the FBI's intelligence needs. With Bowie State, they're ready to stand up an academy for innovation in national security. The system is rich in national centers of academic excellence in cybersecurity. UMBC, Bowie State, College Park, Towson, UMGC. Our well-funded research centers, our tight federal and industry partnerships, our students and workforce that are second to none, all of it makes Maryland the perfect place for FBI headquarters. And that was the pitch we in the system made over and over again. So thank you to all who made it happen. It's a big win for Prince George's County. It's a big win for Maryland. Now on to some individual excellence. I was excited to join Coppin State last month as they cut the ribbon on their new College of Business. $45 million facility, the first new building to open at Coppin since 2015. It will be a hub for business education in Baltimore and a catalyst for university growth and community development. As I said at the ribbon cutting, it's an investment in the next generation of students who will remake not only how we do business in America, but who does that business. And honoring its commitment to hashtag Expand Eagle Nation, Coppin inked a transfer agreement with the Colorado Community College System, offering graduating two-year students in-state tuition rates. Congratulations for all of that, President Jenkins. The University of Maryland College Park affirmed its status as the capital of quantum with the opening this fall of the National Quantum Lab. The world's quantum experts are going to gather at QLab in the university's Discovery District to build quantum technology with real-world impact. Speaking of the Discovery District, President Pines announced this fall that that district is growing by 22 acres, enabling even more R&D partnerships. And speaking of R&D, College Park's research enterprise swelled this year to a record $834 million, which is a 23% surge over its fiscal year 22 record high. That's an incredible feat, President Pines. Thank you. UBalt has launched a multidisciplinary center within its College of Public Affairs to support local and national communities in improving mental health and community health, to prioritize prevention in tackling the underlying or upstream issues that lead to substance use and behavioral challenges and threaten our collective well-being. And this fall, UBalt's Second Chance College program held a commencement ceremony for its students at Jessup, actually at Jessup Correctional. The first time a graduation ceremony has taken place inside the prison. The coverage was deeply moving. President Schmoke, thank you. Keeping with our justice system, at Bowie State, the Institute for Restorative Justice and Practices, together with the Judge Alexander Williams Jr. Center at College Park, is joining the Maryland Equitable Justice Collaborative, which is being led by the Office of the Attorney General. This is a collaborative which will address the disproportionate incarceration of Black men in Maryland prisons. Additionally, 3 U.S. Department of Education grants to BSU worth $3.5 million will provide scholarships to future teachers and leaders serving children in special education, children who are increasingly diverse, while our teaching profession itself remains largely white. Thank you for those efforts, President Breaux. At UMB, Maryland Carey Law launched the Gibson Banks Center for Race and the Law, providing a critical space for scholarship, engagement, and action on issues of equality and justice with a focus on systems and institutions. And UMB School of Medicine continued its worldwide leadership in xenotransplantation, conducting the second ever surgery implanting a genetically modified pig's heart into a human patient. The school, as you'll recall, had pioneered the procedure with the first surgery in 2022. Our most recent patient lived for nearly 6 weeks following surgery, and in so doing will likely be credited with helping in the future to save thousands of people who die each year awaiting transplant organs. Thank you, President Jarrell, and all who were involved. Frostburg State is partnering with the West Virginia School of Osteopathic Medicine in a program that prepares students in the region to pursue careers in osteopathic medicine closer to their homes so that they can hopefully stay in their communities and provide vital care where it's currently often least accessible. And the inaugural Bobcat Innovation Launchpad this fall was a huge success, partnering with TEDCO, Deloitte, and the USM Launch Fund. Frostburg hosted multidisciplinary teams of 70 students who developed and pitched business models and tech solutions to problems in energy generation and climate change. Congratulations, Vice President D'Elia. Salisbury University is playing a key role in a $28 million Maryland Tutoring Corps. This is a grant from the Maryland Department of Education, partnering with Wicomico County's public schools to improve middle and high school math proficiency, especially among historically underserved students. 30 tutors, primarily SU students and retired educators, will provide rigorous intervention and high-dose tutoring to meet individual growth targets for students struggling in math. Provost Couch, welcome and thank you. At our regional centers, our RHEC, the USM at Hagerstown, partnered in Washington County Town Hall series on the opioid overdose crisis. Community members and leaders came together to inventory regional needs and map a plan for correcting them. So, Dr. Jacob Ashby, thank you for this important advocacy on a critical public health problem. And last month, the universities at Shady Grove hosted the 11th annual Montgomery County Business Hall of Fame induction ceremony. Over the years, that event has raised more than $1.6 million for scholarships at USG, benefiting over 1,200 students. Well done to you, Dr. Kademian. And later this month, I'll be traveling to the USM at Southern Maryland to talk with employers, public officials, and community organizations about the growing number of bachelor's programs offered at USM-SM, and to activate these stakeholders as champions for education and employment in the region, which is very important. Looking forward to it, Dr. Abel. Just last week, UMES flew higher than the Hawks normally do aboard the Virgin Galactic S space launch. There was a payload designed by UMES's Dr. Aaron Persad to test how confined fluid behaves in a low gravity environment. Now, back on Earth, Dr. Anderson, UMES was the lead sponsor for an evening with Joyce Abbott. Now, for the uninitiated, as frankly I was, Miss Abbott is an educator in Philadelphia. She was a beloved teacher to a young Quinta Brunson. She's the inspiration for Miss Brunson's wildly popular sitcom, Abbott Elementary. And yes, Miss Abbott is a proud UMES alum. So thank you, Dr. Anderson, for UMES's work in educating teachers that inspire us all. UMBC has announced some significant grants in recent weeks. Dr. Yoni Zohar will lead a $10 million international partnership to scale land-based salmon aquaculture, which advances global security, environmental sustainability, and economic resilience. Dr. Aaron Green has won a $1.2 million study to assess cellular pathways involved in cancer and neurodegenerative diseases. And Dr. Vandana Jujeta will partner with UMCs on a $1 million grant using high-performance computing to understand and predict critical changes in the environment. Speaking of the environment, last month, UMCES hosted more than 150 public and private sector leaders to launch a collaboratory harnessing big data and advanced cyber infrastructure to tackle environmental challenges. UMCES Chesapeake Global Collaboratory is what they call a think and do tank to shape environmental action that's improved by more people, deeper data, better technology, broader engagement for more nimble and more democratic science. And the big splash that Governor Moore made about 1.7 billion juvenile oysters being planted in the Chesapeake Bay, a planting that exceeded the 2023 goal, set a new record. Most of these oysters, all those oysters, they came from the hatchery at UMCE's Horn Point Lab. So congratulations, President Dennison. UMGC, the University of Maryland Global Campus, recently announced a new location at Vandenberg Space Force Base in California, teaming with base personnel to support service members, veterans, and their families who aspire to a degree. And brand new rankings from the Military Times Best for Vets program names UMGC the country's #1 public, online, or combination university for veterans and service members, and the country's #1 university in terms of employment. So as we celebrate Veterans Day, President Fowler, well done. Dr. Fowler, I know you've been deeply engaged with your students around the world who are affected by the horrific situation in the Middle East. Students and families who are sheltering in place, student members who may have to deploy. Our thoughts are with you and your team, and of course, with everyone in the UMGC family facing danger and displacement. And it's on this topic that I want to end my report. We're not insulated from the turmoil of the world, not overseas and not here either. Many of our students, faculty, and staff have friends and family directly in harm's way in Gaza and Israel and in countries where the violence is spilling over. I know we all have strong feelings about what happened on October 7th and what's been happening every day since. I know each of us is shaped by who we are, by our life experiences, by our lived history, and that of our loved ones, those here today, our ancestors. That said, I am committed, and this system is committed, to all its people, that they feel safe no matter who they are. And what that requires is dialogue, community connection. It requires civility, even when, especially when, that feels so difficult. It requires that we engage with one another across our differences and without incendiary speech, that we share and listen. Look, I'm not naive enough to hope for agreement, but I am optimistic enough to hold out for the very things that higher education promises us, to draw on our shared humanity and our shared values, to bridge divides, to model empathy, and practice compassion. I know all of our universities are offering support and resources to students who are struggling, I know you're offering opportunities to gather and comfort one another, to talk and to reflect, to remember the dead and pray for the living. My hope is that we emerge from this agony more committed than ever to using what we do for light and for peace. Madam Chair, this concludes my report.
Thank you, Chancellor. We'll now continue with the report of the councils, and we'll begin with the University System of Maryland Student Council. Ms. Gambert.
Good morning, Chair Gooden, Chancellor Perman, the Board of Regents, and University Presidents. After the September board meeting, I had the opportunity to attend the first Chancellor's Chat of the semester, joining Chancellor Perman and a group of undergraduate and graduate students who are majoring in the humanities to discuss their experience and the value of a liberal arts education. And our Vice President for Graduate Affairs later attended the October Chancellor's Chat for first-generation students. And then at our October general meeting, this council had a detailed conversation on the issues we felt were recurring across many campuses, including international student needs, expanding on campus assistantship and job opportunities, dining, and campus safety. Following up, we formed a 6 to 7 person subgroup on international student needs, which was led by our Salisbury University's student representative. And we had a few discussions towards the end of October on drafting a USMSC resolution, which we are specifically hoping to center around international graduate student housing affordability. We had our November general meeting last Sunday, and we are very, very excited to have had Chancellor Perman join the meeting. Thank you so much, Chancellor, for your time. And the representatives spoke with Chancellor Perman about various topics in the short time that we had, such as campus safety, food insecurity, including campus-specific food safety needs, as well as just a general system-wide conversation on expanding food pantries. And along with that, international student needs as well. Afterwards, we shared our progress with creating the housing affordability resolution, reviewed edits to the religious accommodations draft, and prepared for interviewing student region candidates, which will happen this December. And last Friday, I attended the USM Symposium on Civic Education and Engagement at Towson University, and I want to thank President Ginsburg and Dr. Shapiro for having me, as well as Regent Gordine for facilitating the student panel, where we discussed various topics, including integrating civic learning within the curricula, encouraging service learning and voter engagement among students, and also facilitating safe spaces for students to have open dialogue about uncomfortable topics and really hoping to bridge divides. Finally, interest forms for the USM Student Forum were due at the end of October, and we've collected all the responses for that. We've yet to meet together as a group, but that will happen very shortly, where we'll review all the applications and finalize the students who will be presenting at that forum. At first glance, the submissions seem really varied, and that's extremely encouraging. Thank you so much. This concludes my report, and wishing a very happy Diwali to those who celebrate.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you. And we'll move on to it. With the Council of University System Faculty, Dr. Hempbeck.
Good morning, Chair Gooden, Chancellor Perman, Board of Regents, and university presidents, and everybody who's attending today. I'm going to start by going off script because as I was preparing my remarks today, two things and two thoughts just kept on coming back to me. And one thing was that I just kept on going back to when I started as an assistant professor here at Towson. And I am guessing that this is how everybody feels when a group of people come and visit their campus. I am so proud to have all of you here, and I've participated in the growth since 2007. And to be here today, I just felt overwhelming pride and excitement to have you here. And then I'm also very excited about our future and President Ginsburg and the places that we're going to go. That was my first thought. But then a second thought crept in, and I thought, well, I'm going to share both of them. Last week, I went to a conference with middle school teachers from all over, well, middle school professors and teachers from all over the country. And I started in 2003 at College Park, and my first teaching assignment in the United States was at Samuel Ogle Elementary in Bowie. And as I know that we can get bogged down in everything that we're doing, right? And as researchers, we look for what can we do better, and as teachers. But while I listened to teachers all over the country, I really went back to the state of Maryland. I've spent half of my life in Ohio, and I just hit my half point, my second half here. Even though this accent still remains, who knows where that came from? But 50% of my life has been spent in Maryland. And I must say that as I listened to educators from across from pre-K through college level and then the middle school teachers, we are really doing a good job. And I want to thank the state, USM, everybody in this room. We are really doing a good job. And every day when I went to that conference and I heard what was going on in other states, in my opinion, we're second to none. So I just had to share that because it was really exciting. Now I'll go back to my script. I'm better off script than I am on, but here we go. So we have met a few times since I gave my last update, and I want to begin by thanking the Chancellor, Allison Wren, and Zakia Lee, because many of our meetings have been in person, and being virtual and then getting back to in person is a lot of work. And without their help and support, I could not have gotten these meetings going. So thank you so much. Our general body meeting was on October 24th. And we had people in person, but we also have a virtual option. So it was great. We had a really nice turnout. People were happy to be there and to see each other and all of that good stuff. We had a high rate of attendance. This was the first in-person meeting this year since COVID. Last year we had a hybrid, but this meeting was mostly in person. Chancellor Perman came and greeted us. Thank you for your time. And it was wonderful to see you. And we also had our first university president come and visit us in person since COVID. And that's something that I really wanted to get back to this year, was having presidents come and tell us what's going on at their campuses. So thank you to Interim President Perot, who came and gave us a lot of great updates on what was happening at Towson. We also shared the work that we did at the Board of Regents revolving around being student-centered, and we were able to talk a lot about that and get the faculty speaking about that. We then, 2 days later, had the Senate chairs meeting, so we had a lot of together time. Sorry. And this meeting was held in person with a virtual option as well. And this was really great because the Senate chairs had not been able to see each other in person, meet, and really discuss what's going on, faculty needs at all of the campuses, and not only needs, but also faculty initiatives, some of the problems that they're seeing bubble up, but also things that they're working on. Christopher Staton came by that meeting, and he is from the UMB Office of Emergency Management, and he spoke about crisis management on campus. That meeting was held at the USM office in Adelphi. The executive committee also met on October 4th, and we began that meeting by discussing campus safety. It was, I believe, the morning after the Morgan State shootings, and we really came in. We had not prepared to have time to speak about that, but it was obviously top of mind. And then the rest of the month, obviously has led us to, we're going to continue communications about that as well. We're awaiting committee's decisions on specific initiatives that they're going to bring forth, but I do want to just share some quick highlights from the committees. The Faculty Awards Committee, the members have been invited and agreed to participate, and they will begin working on the Board of Regents Awards. The Ed Policy Committee was encouraged by the Chancellor at the April Town Hall and began working on AI and had a webinar last year. They're going to continue that work, and they are currently working with Nancy O'Neill from the Kirwan Center and Maryland Online and Montgomery College to co-sponsor an AI showcase in April as a follow-up from last year's webinar. The committee would also like to address AI in syllabi, course curriculum, assignments, etc. The Faculty Affairs Committee is continuing their work on DEI in alignment with the USM strategic plan. The Legislative Affairs Committee is working on Advocacy Day for 2024, and the Research Committee is discussing how to connect USM research portals and finishing their work on animal care issues. We are looking forward to the Tri-Council meeting, which is scheduled for November 15th, next week. So as we go forward this year, I'm looking forward to continuing to update you on CUSIP's priorities. And please let me know if you have any questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Haverback. No questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next report is the Council of University System Staff presented by Dr. Patricio.
Hello, everyone. First, no, Heather and I did not coordinate outfits today. This is just a coincidence. But Chair Gooden, Chancellor Perman, Regents, USM presidents, good morning. I'd like to thank President Ginsburg and Towson for hosting us. You jumped right in, and it really doesn't feel like it's your 10th day. So, so my report materials for you for today's meeting include details on the CUS action plan for 23-24 and a summary of our priorities for this year. Instead of reading you my report, there's just a couple things that I'd like to highlight from that plan. So first is our effort to improve ombuds access for staff on all of our campuses. Ombuds provide neutral and confidential guidance for staff and others who are facing challenges on our campuses. They serve important roles as arbiters of conflict, taking steps to prevent issues from becoming so big they affect our operations. In this way, they also provide an ear to the ground for campus leadership so that they may understand issues trending among campus populations. This issue has some history, and there are concerns about the availability of resources for this important role. I'll be working with Chancellor Perman and the USM presidents to discuss ways forward that will meet the need for campus ombuds presence and balance the campus resource issues. The second issue we have put forward is related to duplicative fees charged to staff and faculty taking courses at their home institutions. You may know that per Board of Regents policy, staff and faculty must pay student fees when they're taking courses. Some of these fees are not applicable to staff and faculty or are already covered in other fees or benefits staff and faculty receive as part of their employment at our institutions, like parking and IT services. We have sent our request for review of the policy to the USM presidents and look forward to hearing their feedback so we may advance this proposal for eventual board review. Next week, UMBC will host us for the Joint Councils meeting, as Heather mentioned, where CUS, CUSIP, and USMSC will gather to hear from the Chancellor and several regents about our partnership. I'm grateful for everyone's engagement with the event, and I look forward to being able to provide a recap for you. My last topic to share with you all is not part of my report, but is something I've been pondering since the engaging USM retreat a few weeks ago. The focus of our conversations was related to how the USM and our campuses can be more student-centered. While the retreat was fresh in my mind, I attended a conference for college and university business officers, and one of the general sessions was related to student mental health, a surprising topic for that group. What was even more surprising was the content of the session itself. It was unlike any talk on student mental health I have ever attended, and I'd like to share with you a brief bit about it today. The speaker was the incoming president of the University of British Columbia, Dr. Antoine Benoit Becot. Pardon my French pronunciation. He spoke about student mental health by talking about his own mental health journey, growing up in an abusive household and his handling of his traumatic childhood through substance abuse and addiction. that began when he was a teenager and continued until 10 years ago. He shared that good mental health care is a lifelong effort, not something you only engage in when things are dire. His willingness to be honest and vulnerable was startling, to say the least, because we do not often see this vulnerability from leadership. Yet it created an environment where even in that moment, where he was giving his talk, others in the audience wanted to share and engage in the conversation about their own mental health and response. Imagine what that does on his campus, allowing students and faculty and staff to address their own mental health in honest and productive ways. As I wrap up my report, I'd like to leave you with a quote from his talk, where he said that we should view education as the expansion and refinement of our shared vision of being whole, free, and fulfilled. Though challenging and likely uncomfortable for most, perhaps part of being student-centered is being willing to engage in more open and honest care for all of us engaged in the educational process as a model for our students, with less paternal oversight and more shared engagement and healing. Thank you for your time today.
Any questions for Dr. Patricia? Seeing none, thank you. And now we'll have the Council of University System Presidents, President Bro.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
We need some more coffee in the room. Good morning and happy Friday, Chair Gooden, Chancellor Perman, Board of Regents, everyone gathered here in this room and virtually. I'd like to begin by acknowledging our veterans as well for their service to our country. And yes, I heard an applause. You can applaud for our veterans always. And thank you to our host, President Mark Ginsburg, and the entire Towson campus community for the warm welcome that we received. And President Ginsburg, welcome to the Council of University System Presidents. And just know that we wish Towson University and you the very best as you continue on your journey. We hope the very best and a very, very bright future for you. Could I have another round of applause for our president of Towson? CUS met twice on October 2nd and November 6th since the last board meeting. And during the October meeting, Senior Vice Chancellor Wren spoke about FAFSA. There are going to be major changes to FAFSA, and she discussed the simplification that is on the horizon to hopefully help students and their families. She noted that the new form will come out in December, and the campuses have discussed how we are preparing for the new FAFSA form. Senior Vice Chancellor Herbst led a discussion about the possibility of a federal government shutdown. A 45-day continuing resolution was passed, but the group discussed strategies for a possible shutdown later in the year. Vice Chancellor Hogan covered the Gun Safety Act, passed during the last legislative session, and what it means for our campuses. And this led to a robust discussion of recent incidents of violence on the campuses in Maryland. The November meeting focused on two topics: consolidated collective bargaining and campus climate in response to the conflict in the Middle East. Senior Vice Chancellor Herbst, Associate Vice Chancellor Skolnick, and Director of Labor, Roja, provided an update on consolidated collective bargaining negotiations and answered questions from the presidents. Chancellor Perman opened up discussion regarding campus climate, and he stressed that civility, as you heard here today, civility must be at the center of any discussions or actions related to the conflict. The presidents then provided insight as to what they are seeing on their campuses and how we are supporting our students. And as I conclude, I just want to wish everyone, since we won't meet before the Thanksgiving holiday, a very happy Thanksgiving. This concludes my report.
Any questions for President Bro?
Thank you.
Thank you. And now we'll move to public comment. Ms. Wilkerson will moderate the session. Ms. Wilkerson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Getting caught up in my mask, sorry. Each regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of Regents will include a period for public comment. In accordance with the guidelines for public comment, which are posted on the USM website, the agenda includes 15 minutes set aside for this purpose. Requests for public comment should be submitted 48 hours before the meeting, and comments should pertain to to an item on the agenda. Today, we have 2 speakers who have requested to address the board. Each will have 3 minutes to do so. Only the individual speaking will be allowed at the podium. The board fully dedicates the period of public comment to the speakers and will not respond to questions or comments during the meeting. As needed, any follow-up will take place after the meeting. So today, we're going to ask Jenna Nasser to come up. She will be making public comment on the quasi-endowment grant request. Following Jenna, we have Asiya Silmi, who will also be providing public comment on the quasi-endowment request. So Jenna.
All right. Good morning. I come before you today as a student at the University of Maryland, College Park, and I respectfully request that the board and the broader general public consider implementing modifications to the current operations of the endowment fund. While the university system claims to invest a portion of this endowment fund directly back into our campuses, as students, we find ourselves time and time again unable to are made and no visibility throughout the entire process. The University System of Maryland Foundation operates as a private entity. This shields it from any public scrutiny or accountability. And it is for these reasons that I urge the university system to embrace transparency in its investment process and grant students, faculty, and staff a meaningful role in the decision-making process. UMD has proven time and time again that they will continue supporting defense contractors and fund corporations that thrive off the human rights violations of others. In 2019, Lockheed Martin awarded the Clark School of Engineering $3 million. To this day, the university both donates and accepts enormous amounts of money from Lockheed Martin. An entire building on campus is named after the founder of a corporation that creates the very same bombs that are dropped on innocent lives of people facing oppression all across the globe. UMD continues to partner with companies such as Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, L3Harris, and so many others who are funding the numerous injustices happening across the world. Recent news revealed that UMD Student Government Association intends to establish a committee to evaluate renaming the hall Francis Scott Key. This committee will assess whether the historical views of Francis Scott Key, an anti-abolitionist, align with the university values. However, Glenn Martin Hall stands prominently on our campus, and to this day, there are no discussions about making any changes to the name, and there have been no discussions about the concerning values that this building represents. It raises a pressing question. Does Glenn Martin Hall align with the UMD values? Do UMD values implicitly condone oppression and injustice? Do UMD values align with the creation of weapons used to harm innocent lives? University of Maryland is among the most militarized schools in America. By default, as students, we are constantly finding ourselves entangled in the ongoing oppression, as the majority of our university sponsors and partnerships are funded off of the ongoing oppression of others. As students, we insist on transparency in the investment process and a voice to where these funds are being invested into. It is our right as students to ensure our education is not funded at the expense of others, because that is what UMD values should align with. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nasser. Next, we have Asiya Silmi, who will also make comments on the quasi-endowment investment grant.
Morning. My name is Asiya Silmi. I am a Palestinian American student at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. Today, I address the pressing topics of civil and global engagement under the Endowment Fund. I aim to shed light on the responsibility of our academic institution bears and the ongoing genocide faced by the Palestinian people. It is critical for the University System of Maryland to reassess its connections, especially those potentially contributing to the occupation, apartheid, and systematic discrimination against Palestinians. This encompasses research partnerships, study abroad programs, and financial support, urging a careful review of our affiliations. Our academic institution has a moral obligation to stand for justice and humanity by evaluating potentially disengaging from entities contributing to the suffering of Palestinian people. We take a principled stance against complicity in such injustice. The involvement with entities like Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman must be reevaluated due to their roles in fueling violence against Palestinian civilians. Financial divestments from entities complicit in these atrocities is critical to align with our commitment to ethical global participation. As a Palestinian American student, I urge the Board of Regents to reconsider our collective responsibility in these global matters. To UMBC and Maryland universities must disengage themselves from entities complicit in human rights violations. To stand on the right side of history, uphold our university's commitment to justice, equity, and global engagement. It is essential to reconsider our connections that implicate us in human rights abuses and uphold our commitment to ethical global participation. By continuing the status quo of support of the occupation and massacre of Palestinians, you have blood on your hands.
Thank you, Ms. Silmy. Madam Chair.
We want to thank those individuals who took the time to share their thoughts with the board. We certainly appreciate your input. We'll now move on to the consent agenda. The next order of business is the consent agenda. Decisions regarding these items to include on the consent agenda were made by me and the committee chairs. However, any regent may request that an item be removed from the consent agenda for separate review and discussion. Before I move approval of the consent agenda, I ask if there are any items that any region would like removed from the consent agenda for separate review and discussion. Seeing none, I move approval of all the items on the consent agenda.
Second.
All those in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. To the committee reports. And first up, we'll have the Finance Committee report from Regent Fish. She'll be introducing the fall 2023 enrollment update and fiscal year 2024 estimated enrollment report. I'll turn it over to Regent Fish.
Okay. Thank you, Chair Gooden. So in your material, you have the annual preliminary fall update, and it is really the first look at enrollment following the beginning of the fall term. The final report will be released shortly, but this preliminary report traditionally has tracked well with our fall numbers. And we've asked Chad Muntz, Associate Vice Chancellor and Head of the Systems Institutional Research, Data, and Analytics Office to summarize these findings and to provide some comparison, if you will, to some nationally available data. And I will now turn this over to Chad, and it appears that there is some good news.
That's right. Thank you, Regent Fish and board. I have before you the preliminary headcount report. The complete data is in your packet. Before I begin, I just want to thank both the colleagues that I work with in the system office, as well as your institutions and your colleagues who help curate, find, and gather these enrollment data for us to look at and pull out the creative insights that we need for decision making. So with that, I want to move forward to the purpose of this report. And that is, according to board policy, in the spring, we come to you with enrollment projections. This is based on the enrollment plan that the institutions work with the system office to create a 10-year projection and expectation for the immediate fall semester, as well as the following semesters after that. In accordance with board policy, a report to the board is required to look at the attainment of that plan based on actual fall numbers. So that is the purpose of this report. In addition, we also provide a FTE estimate. And what that means is all of the credit-based students that are included in this report, we aggregate the total credit hours and divide by what a full-time load would look like to provide one number of all of the enrollment that might influence or impact decision-making related to capital planning, operating budget like tuition and fees, as well as debt management, and our faculty workload for the number of courses and instructors required to meet our demand. So with that, the good news is our enrollment is up for the first time in 5 years. I'm very happy to report that we have an estimated headcount of 164,802. That's about a 1.3% increase over last year. And again, the first time in 5 years. I'll probably say that a few more times today because for the last few years, I've had to give the downside news. So our credit hours track in the same way. And this is largely because our increase is with full-time students, both at the undergrad and graduate level. So you will see a very similar FTE increase. And that is very positive for our operations. I will say that our headcount enrollment of 164,000 is similar to fall 2021, 2 years ago, but our FTE is higher, indicating our students are taking more credits and we have more full-time students. I have a couple data displays just to show you what's been happening over the last decade or so. The top yellow line is our total enrollment, headcount enrollment at the University System of Maryland. The black line is our undergraduate enrollment, and the gray line is our graduate enrollment. As you can see, our total enrollment is influenced by our undergraduate enrollment, and that makes sense. That's where we see the most changes, and we serve the most students is at the undergraduate level. Again, this is just undergraduate credit hour students. It does not include any enrollment that is in the non-credit side that your institutions might be doing. Our graduate enrollment, same thing as the credit hour students, and it has been slowly decreasing, but it is only 0.3% this year. And our full-time graduate numbers actually have increased over the last 2 years. So we are on a steady decline, but it's mostly at the part-time graduate level. Now, what does it look like for each institution? And from my perspective, what I'm looking at is how did we do over the last 5 years, especially given the pandemic? So fall 2019 is the red bar. So each in this graph are 5 years worth of total enrollment for each of our campuses. And what I'm looking for is, did enrollment stay steady? Is it increasing over the last couple of years? And how does it compare to the 2019 fall semester before the pandemic? And what we can see is about half of our institutions are about the same or better than fall 2019 or close to it. And a couple of our institutions are a little bit lower. And that's really largely due to the replenishment of the pipeline. So over the last few years, we've had a decrease in new students, both at the first time level and at the transfer level. And so our institutions have been ramping up the first time new students and replenishing that pipeline. And it's just going to take a couple of years for that to fully get back to where it used to be. But there is good news in this. And so in this report, we have the first time enrollment numbers. And what we can see is for the first time, we hit a new record of first-time, full-time new students at the University System of Maryland with over 15,000 freshmen, as you might know them. 2 of our campuses have all-time high numbers on their campus, including Towson, where we are today, and in College Park with just over 6,000, and Towson was almost at 3,000 this fall. Almost all of our campuses have the same or higher first-time, full-time new student pipeline as they did in 2019. Why this is important is at the undergraduate level, about 60% of our undergraduate students who begin as a first-time, full-time student are part of the overall undergraduate population. So as this pipeline replenishes, you will see the freshmen become sophomores, the sophomores become juniors, juniors, seniors, et cetera. We are also hoping and waiting for the numbers from the community colleges, because just like the public 4 years, the community colleges also had a decrease in first-time students. Last year, there was an increase. The rumor or the news that we've heard so far with no public reports is that the first-time students have returned at the community colleges as well. So we expect in the next couple of years an increase in Maryland Community College transfers, and that will help these numbers, especially at a place like Towson, where about half of the first-time or half of the new students came from the Maryland Community College pipeline. So the other graph, you might have seen a downward trend, but in this graph, you see an upward trend indicating that enrollment is improving. And then finally, although there's a lot more information we could provide, I will just summarize with what it looks like with our national trends. The National Student Clearinghouse just released a report. You might have read that report in different news publications. Nationally, the first-time full-time enrollment declined 3.6%. However, at the University System of Maryland, we increased 6.7% to our highest enrollment ever of just over 15,000 students. Nationally, the first-time enrollment is just up about 0.8% or almost 1% over fall 2021, whereas at the University System of Maryland, behind 3 years of new student growth, we are at 9% higher than fall 2021 and higher than we were pre-pandemic. Nationally, the total enrollment has increased 2%. We're right around 1.3%. And that's really because of the difference between our growth at the undergraduate level was close to the national growth percentage, but our graduate growth declined about 0.03%. So, but again, our full-time graduate students increased. So we are expecting similar growth at the community college, and hopefully it will match the national report that we see a 7.5% increase in first-time students at the community college. Another good news in this report is our HBCU enrollment increased. So when we add our 3 institutions together, Bowie, Coppin, and UMES, we had a growth of about 5.1% compared to last year. Our total enrollment at our HBCUs is as high as fall 2019. And again, this matches the growth that we see nationally. Nationally, there was overall growth in full-time and part-time. At USM, we had an increase in full-time students in our FTE, indicating, again, more students are taking more, are registered for more classes. And finally, I'll just point out that this does not include any of our non-credit enrollment. As I mentioned earlier, that is still something that we would like to know more about and talk about as we move forward, because those are educational opportunities that are existing on this campus that do not get captured in our traditional degree-seeking coursework. And with that, that is my high-level summary, Regent Fish, and if there's any questions.
Thanks, Chad. Any questions or discussion?
Andy?
Thank you. Just one question. I want to make sure I understand the math correctly. So we're seeing significant increases in first-time enrollment freshmen, but the overall increase over the course of all of the universities is significantly smaller, like a 25%. So that could be a function of graduating classes being larger than those that are filling them, or a retention problem, or both.
Oh, that is a great point. That was one of my key points I forgot to mention. So enrollment is made up of both new students and retained students. So you are correct with that. We've also, during the pandemic, saw an increase in time to degree at some of our institutions with not much else to do. Some of our students took more classes. At the same time, we were able to bring in some near completers. We saw an increase in graduation numbers during that time. So you are correct that there is positive attrition in these numbers. We have to replace those students through our pipeline and bring them in. Yeah.
Yes, Anwar?
Quick question on how much increase in in-state and out-of-state? What's the difference there in the enrollment?
Yeah, that's a great question. This is a preliminary head count. Our institutions are preparing those final numbers at the unit record level that will go on to the state and to the Maryland longitudinal data system. We will have more. That data does not come into us yet. This report is very basic. It's full-time, part-time, undergrad, grad, and then first-time students, and that's really it. It's to get a first look of how we're doing.
So I
Right.
just remind folks that there is an enrollment work group. And in that work group, we look at the enrollment, each campus's enrollment plan, as well as this data in more detail. So as more of that data comes in, it comes to the enrollment work group and we'll look at that and then bring it back.
And I'll open it up. If any of the presidents have the answer to that question, you guys can provide it.
The percentage in state, is that?
In-state versus out-of-state.
I mean, I just have it for my own institution.
Yes, for your own institution.
I mean, for College Park is 75.8% in state. So the rest is out of state or international, undergraduate.
Anthony?
I was going to add for compensate our out-of-state students is roughly about 10-12%.
My question was the growth.
Right.
Oh,
Where was the growth
from last year.
occurring?
was the
occurring in
growth
in-state or
occurring
out?
in-state or out of state?
For comp in both. Yes, we see an increase in out-of-state and in-state students.
Same for College Park.
Aminta?
At Bowie State, we're seeing an increase in out-of-state students. That has been part of our strategy to diversify our population.
At UMBC, our number is about 93% in-state and our growth is the same in-state, out-of-state. It's not changed.
Towson's about 90% in-state, and the growth also is proportional across both.
Any others? Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. UMES we're seeing a 30%, and the growth is in both out of state and in state, and it's done intentionally.
Thank you.
Any other questions? By the Regents.
Thank you, Chad.
Sure.
Our next report is an item for the Committee of the Whole. Senior Vice Chancellor Nguyen will provide a more detailed summary of the Board of Regents retreat held last month. Dr. Nguyen, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Gooden. Good morning. As Chair Gooden addressed at the beginning of today's meeting, we had an engaging Board of Regents retreat in October focused on the topic of the student-centric system, a value proposition. Let me provide a few highlights from the retreat. Prior to the retreat, as you might remember, we had homework. We were asked to define a student-centered university, a student-centered system, and challenges to creating institutions focused on students. We shared ideas such as encouraging student autonomy, providing needed support services for students, engaging students in active learning, being inclusive, and supporting faculty as they created new ways of teaching. We were also reminded that student-centered does not mean that we don't still provide substantial challenges to our students as they move through their degree programs. We used this information throughout the 2 days as we engaged in conversations with each other. We started the first day listening to our students. The student panel shared with us what it meant to be student-centric. You'll recall that many of them talked about their concerns regarding the cost of higher education, mental health challenges, the difficulties in feeling a sense of belonging on campus. However, despite these challenges, they still have a belief in the value of their higher education. For many of us, the experience and barriers our students have faced were eye-opening and important for us to hear. These conversations continued later when we talked to students at our tables. It is critical moving forward that we continue to include the voices of our students in our work on becoming a more student-centric system. Matt Siegelman, president of the Burning Glass Institute, provided a presentation on measuring and enhancing student outcomes from higher education. His talk focused on the opportunities ahead of us, as well as the challenges. The opportunities are how can we create skill-based degrees? The challenges, we need to still ensure a liberal arts education for our students. He discussed the ways in which jobs are evolving in profound ways and very quickly. And it ended by encouraging us to consider how equity is also a key element in this work. We started the second day with a conversation and presentations about students and their safety. Although this was not part in the original plan for the board retreat, it was incredibly timely and important. We will continue these conversations on safety as we have already done today and at future board meetings. We then focused on developing a better understanding of the public perception of the University System of Maryland when we were provided with a review of the BVK research findings. This data will provide the foundation for our branding as a system. And then, prior to diving into conversations related to our strategic plan, Chad gave us some great data to enhance our conversations about our students. Over lunch and discussion, we were assigned themes from our strategic plan and talked about how we can bolster Vision 2030 and embark on the path to becoming the preeminent student-centric system of universities. Tables reported their results on their discussions. As a reminder, the assigned themes were career and workforce development, diversity, equity, and inclusion, institutional collaborations, research, affordability, and alternative credentials. Throughout all these topics, there emerged a need for the system and its universities to be as flexible and supportive of students as we can. This included support for students in entering and understanding the world of work as soon as possible within their degree programs. This could be through internships or other similar activities. Students also need hands-on opportunities to be involved in and conduct research throughout their academic career. Some of this work, whether internships, research, or similar opportunities, could lead to alternative credentials, which our students tell us they very much want. Another topic that came up was the question of how can the system provide opportunities for students to take classes throughout the universities in the system. Although there are long-standing processes for interinstitutional registration, how can we do a better job at sharing these opportunities with students, advisors, and faculty? Throughout the strategic plan, we need to ensure a focus on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belongingness. Student success in the classroom depends on them feeling welcome on their campuses. Finally, returning to themes addressed by our student panel on the first day, we need to find a way to make a college education affordable to anyone who wants one. I would say, even though this was my first retreat, I was very impressed with the model we created for active learning and discussion, and we should continue to use that as our standard for moving forward. We still have much work ahead of us, but we should all be excited about the opportunities and challenges in the future. Thank you.
Any questions for Dr. Nguyen? Okay, seeing none. It's unusual, but seeing none, thank you, Dr. Nguyen. I'd like to begin the close by thanking President Ginsburg for his first 10 days, which have been very productive, and for hosting us in those first 10 days. So a round of applause, please. Which brings us to the close of today's meeting. The Open Meetings Act permits public bodies to close their meetings to the public in circumstances outlined in 3-305 of the Act and to carry out administrative functions exempted by 3-103 of the Act. The Board of Regents will now vote to reconvene in closed session. The agenda for the public meeting today includes a written statement with a citation of the legal authority and reasons for closing the meeting, and a listing of the topics to be discussed. The statement has been provided to the Regents, and it is posted on the USM's website. Do I have a motion to move into close?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the closed session